All right, so now we are going to look at example 2 of the piecewise functions. So the first one, we had 2 different linear functions. I am fairly certain that this is as tricky as it's going to get. Just the linear functions. We're not going to be coming up with quadratic functions, anything that's too insane for these examples. So as I mentioned before, this is a piecewise function, and there is a special type of piecewise function, and that's called a step function. Now, you should be familiar with something like this from Algebra 1. The step function is a special type of piecewise function in which all of the parts are just constant functions. So notice it kind of looks like a set of stairs, and that's where it gets its name from. So I'm going to count. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different parts. That's going to be 7 different equations that we're going to have. Notice our bracket here is a lot bigger than the one we had for our last example. So like I said before, I like to highlight where all my boundary points are. So I see I'm going from -1 to 0 here. The next part goes from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and 5 to 6. So now I'm going to write down what all of those boundary lines are. So this is -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now it's also helpful in here to recognize on each step what the value is. So this one is -1, 0. The next one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I can see my graph is going to take on the values -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in different intervals. So those are actually my equations for these, because when you have a constant function, it's just y equals that value. So my first part, the function is -1. And notice I have a closed circle on the left and an open circle on the right. So that means that my values for x are from -1. So I have -1 is less than or equal to x is less than 0. So in your last example, remember I told you that you cannot have 2 values where you have less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So I'm just going to slide back up. This one had a less than or equal to, and this one had a greater than. So this is where it gets really important with that, because notice how at the value of x equals 0, I have an open circle at -1 and a closed circle at 0. So my next part of the function is 0, but then I have 0 is less than or equal to x. That's a closed circle, is less than 1. So this one goes from 0 to 1. This side has an open circle, so it just has a less than. This side has a closed circle, so it has the less than or equal to. This tells you that the value of, let's say, f of 0 would be evaluated here and not here. So 0 needs to fall into one of these categories. Clearly in this one, it falls into the second category, not the first one. This means it gets very close to 0, but does not hit it. So that's really important. So I have these two all set. So my next one is at 1. And that one goes from 1 to 2. So 1 is less than or equal to x, it's less than 2. My next one is at 2. So 2 is less than or equal to x is less than 3. And that one goes from 2 to 3. Next one is at 3. And that one goes from 3 to 4. So 3 is less than or equal to x is less than 4. Then the value of 4 goes from 4 to 5, and then the value of 5 goes between 5 and 6. Let's expand that bracket there. So now, like I said, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parts, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 equations. So now the domain and range of these ones are a little bit different. So domain, notice it goes from -1 to 6. On the left side, I have an included circle. So it goes from -1 to 6, and every value between there is hit. Yes, you have some jumping, but if you picked, let's say, the value of 3, there is a value that goes with the value 3. So it goes from -1 to 6. The -1 is included because of the filled in circle. The 6 is not included, so that will have a parenthesis instead of a bracket. The other way to write this would be -1 is less than or equal to x is less than 6. So x is between -1 and 6. Now the range is also different because it only takes on these 7 values. So when I write my range, I'm actually using set notation where I use those brackets, and the range is only the 7 values. So I write -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It does not take on any values between there. It only takes on those values. And like I said before, because I have to pick up my pencil between each step in order to trace, this is not continuous.